audio was turned on to give me answers to the questions that I'm showing now. Hello.
Hi, sir.
So can you see the activity question that I've given there?
Yes, I can see the drawing and then the question.
Okay. So can you answer the questions?
Yes, I'm on it.
Okay.
Hello, sir.
Hello.
So for the feeding level do a spider occupy? So that one is secondary. Yes, and then which organism is both a secondary and a tertiary consumer? So that one too is lizard.
Lizard.
Yes,
Okay.
sir.
So your answer to the first question is correct, but the second is wrong. Now I ask you, why did you choose spider for the first question? Why is the spider?
This because
Why is the spider? You said it's a secondary consumer, right? So
yes, sir.
why is it so?
Sir, because other organisms feed on spider. We have a last organism which feed on spider, and then spider too feed on flies, and then.
Okay. Now with the second one, it's which organism is both a secondary and a tertiary consumer? Now the answer is not lizard. Why?
Yes, sir.
The answer is the swallows. The answer is the swallows, because when you look at the swallows, it can feed on the aphids and can also feed on spider and likewise flies.
Okay.
Now, if you notice one thing, look at the lizard. There's no organism that can feed on that lizard. But with this swallows, it can feed on the spider. So it has a varied option that you can choose from. Are you okay?
Okay, sir.
Wonderful.
Yes, sir.
Okay. So if you can turn on your audio, then I'll continue with what we have today.
Yes, sir. So you can continue.
Okay. So in today's activity, we looked at last week we looked at the food chain and the food web, and we're establishing the fact that food chain is a linear feeding relationship where food is being transferred from one organism to another. So where food is being moved from one trophic level to another. Now, there's an easier way to put these organisms in either a food chain or a food web. There's an easier way, an easier method where you can group these organisms in a food chain or food web. Now, this easier way that can be used is where we group organisms in the form of, or in a pyramid form. We group them in a form of a pyramid. So each organism with its succeeding trophic level or succeeding stage, it's in the form of a pyramid. So from the base, that's the bottom, to the top, that's the apex. Now this means where these organisms are grouped in the pyramid is what we call ecological pyramids. What we call ecological pyramids. So let me read and you understand what I was trying to say. Now, to simplify the complexity of an ecosystem, ecologists often graph the relationship in an ecosystem as a pyramid, with the primary producers' trophic level at the base and the consumers' level above it. So that, as I was saying, it's more or less in a pyramid form. Now, this pyramid form, at the base of it, at the lower part of it, is where the producers are. Then at the rest, or those above the producers, is the consumers. So either the primary consumer, secondary consumer, or tertiary consumer. So that is how the trophic level is like, the pyramid is like. I hope if you can remember this social studies, you did Abraham Maslow's theories or something like that. Yeah, you had a pyramid. Now that's how the pyramid looks like. Now this same pyramid is where it looks like this ecological pyramid. So we have people, organisms that are found at the base, that is the bottom of the pyramid, and we have succeeding organisms on top of it. Now there are common ecological pyramids that we study. Now over here, our study will be based on just 3 of these ecological pyramids. So 1, we'll look at pyramid of numbers. 2, pyramid of biomass. Then 3, pyramid of energy. You look in other books, they'll say pyramid of energy and productivity. The same thing. So 1, pyramid of numbers. 2, pyramid of biomass. And 3, pyramid of energy. So we'll start with the pyramid of numbers. Now, should in case you have any question, you turn on your audio, then you ask the question. You alert me, ask the question. Okay. Now let's look at what this pyramid of number is. What does it talk about? Now, in pyramid of numbers, organisms occupy the pyramid based on their trophic level. So at the lower part, the base, as I said, producers. Then the consumers are above it. So either the primary, secondary, or tertiary consumers are there. Now, this pyramid of numbers enables you to know the particular number of organisms that are being fed on or that feed on other organisms. So it deals with their number. How many are they? 1. And the size of these organisms. So this ecological pyramid, it tells you the number of organisms that feed or are being fed on by another organism and the size of these organisms. Now, as one progresses along a food chain, the number of organisms which can be supported at each level gets less and less. Now, if you could remember in our previous studies, we looked at a food chain. That we drew a simple food chain where you have a producer's, example, grass. So green grass, you would have green grass in your around you. Now, if they ask you to go and count them, I'm not sure you can count the grasses there. Talk about individual ones. You can't count everything because there are many. Now on this same grass that you have, when you allow when you leave the grass just there for it's not in use, you can have about 100 grasshoppers feeding on the grass. Now look at the number of grass. You can have about 1,000 grass at that particular point. 100 grasshoppers can feed on it. Now on this 100 grasshoppers, you can have about only 20 to 30 to 50 frogs feeding on these grasshoppers. So as the food chain is increasing or is moving up each trophic level, the number of organisms are decreasing. They are decreasing in number. Now, when that is happening, when the organism is moving up the food chain again, the size of the organism increases. The grass is something small. The grasshopper is heavier or looks bigger in size than the grass. The frog feeding on the grasshopper is bigger or looks heavier in size than the grasshopper. Now, if you have a hawk feeding on the frog, the hawk is bigger than the frog. So when you're moving up, organisms tend to increase in size. But with the number of organisms, when it's increasing up the food chain in the pyramid form or in the pyramid of numbers, the number of organisms tend to decrease. So this is represented diagrammatically as pyramid of numbers. Now, so you can have the definition for pyramid of numbers as the representation of number of organisms at different trophic level in a food chain or web. So representation of the number of organisms, it deals with numbers at different trophic level in a food chain. Now, a careful study of such pyramids will reveal that as the pyramid progresses from the base to the apex, that is from down to top, the number of organisms decrease, as I was saying. So when it's moving, it's going up, the number of organisms will decrease, but the size of the organism increases at each trophic level. So the grass is something small, the plant is something small, then being fed on by the grasshopper, which is bigger than bigger in size than the grasshopper. Then the frog bigger than the grasshopper. The hawk feeding on the frog is bigger than the frog. Now, there are other forms that you'd find the pyramid inverted. The apex is has been turned upside down. So the pyramid has been turned upside down. Now, when this happens, it's just a way to tell you that you have grass in a very large ecosystem or a very large plantation. Now, this grass can feed all the organisms up the trophic level. That is when we say this the pyramid is inverted. That one grass, then there are many. It could feed all of them. So when it feeds one organism, other organisms will feed on the one that fed on the grass. The grass is still there feeding that same organism. So it's like the other organisms are dependent on the organism that is feeding on the grass. So the moment the grass dies, the organism that is feeding on the grass dies, the rest of them will also die. That is how the pyramid of the inverted pyramid looks like. I'll show you I'll give you images of how it looks like. So in some ecosystem, the pyramid of numbers may be inverted. As I said, this happens in a situation where a single large producer, you can have the grass, may provide food for smaller but numerous consumers. So that is when you say a pyramid of numbers is inverted. Okay, so this is the how the pyramid of numbers look like when you are showing it, when you are drawing the pyramid of numbers. So you have at the base of it, the base is where you have the maize plant. So that is the base of the food chain we are having here. Now, followed by grasshopper. So the maize plant is a producer or primary producer. The grasshopper becomes the primary consumer. The praying mantis is the secondary consumer. Then the lizard is the tertiary consumer. So let's have that idea. Now you can see an arrow going down, indicating increase in numbers and increase in size. So the increase in size, when you look at the maize plant, now the grasshopper can feed on just something small of the maize plant. Just something small. We can't eat all the maize plant, something small. Now the size of the grasshopper and that small part of the maize plant that you ate. Look at, when you know the difference, you know that the grasshopper is bigger in size than that small portion I ate. Then, in terms of size, the praying mantis is far bigger in size than the grasshopper. Likewise, the lizard is also bigger in size than the praying mantis. But when you are in a feeding relationship, now you notice that if the maize plant, let's say you have a big plantation, example, your whole house is a maize plant, you can have about 1,000 grasshoppers feeding on that maize plant in your house. Now, when you leave about 500 praying mantis in the house, you can be able to eat those 1,000 grasshoppers. Now, this same 500 praying mantis, when you leave about 100 lizards, they would show them that they are also big men around, so they will feed on all of them. So as the the numbers is moving up each trophic level, as I said, the numbers their number decrease from the bottom, that is from down to top. But when it's moving from up the bottom to the top, their size they have an increase in size. Not that the food chain is enabling them increase in size, but they're already bigger in size. They look bigger in size than the other lower organisms. Now the inverted pyramid, this is how it looks like. So the pyramid has been turned upside down. Instead of you to have the bigger portion, the portion of bacteria or protozoa or aphids at the end, it has been turned upside down. So this rose bush provides the basis of food for all the other organisms in each trophic level. Now the rose bush here is a producer. Is the one produces all the food for them. Is the main plant. Then these aphids would feed on the rose bush. Then you can find this bacteria and protozoa on the aphids. So they are on them, they are in them. So they feed, they are numerous. You can find a lot of them on one aphid. Just one, you can find a lot of them on them. So this tells you that one is inverted. This rose bush provides a lot of energy for all of them. We'll look at that when we are treating pyramid of energy. So if you have any question on the pyramid of numbers, then you are let me. Then I answer the question. If not, I'm moving on. Okay. Now, although this pyramid of numbers is easily constructed, so when you have a picture of the food chain that you are dealing with, you can easily construct the pyramid of numbers. Now, it has some disadvantages. The fact that it's easy to construct doesn't mean that it doesn't have any issue. It has a lot of issues. Now, some of these are one. Each organism is regarded as one, regardless of their size. Each organism is regarded as one, regardless of their size. So let's say you have the grass. As I said, if there are 1,000 grass there, the whole 1,000 grass are regarded as one grass. So that's how you see green plant. Just that's a green plant. So they are regarded as just one organism. Not that they are more. They are regarded as one. Now, if you have 1,000 grasshoppers feeding on that, their grasshoppers are regarded as also one. They are all grasshoppers that are regarded as one. That is the disadvantage that it deals with this pyramid of numbers. 2, single populations are often difficult to distinguish, especially where several are massed together. Example, moss plant. Now, at the point where these organisms, they are single organisms, individual organisms. Now, at the point in time, you see that there will be some physical barriers between them, enabling them to or difficult distinguishing when they are put together or they are classified as one. So a practical example of such is the moss plant. The moss plant. Then number 3, it's difficult to choose a proper scale because of the great difference in the number at each trophic level. So each stage has a different number of organisms. So let's say, as I was saying, the grass, you can have more than 1,000, then grasshopper 500. So because of the numbers are different, choosing the scale when you want to draw a graph or when you want to estimate a number for them becomes difficult. So that tells you the pyramid of numbers. Then pyramid of biomass. If you have any question on the pyramid of numbers, you can ask. Very well. Then pyramid of biomass. Now let's first look at what biomass is. How do you define biomass? What is it? Now this biomass tells you the dry or wet mass of an organism. Let me simplify it for you. It tells you the dry or wet mass of an organism. Just something simple. That is biomass. So it's more or less pertaining to how the organism weighs. But with this one, there's something special about it because it's how the organism weighs per its unit area. That is how different it looks. Now, when an organism at its trophic level or in a food chain are obtained, dried and weighed, the weight represents the biomass of the group in that habitat. Now, that's the so you can have the definition for biomass. It is the total living or dry mass of an organism of a species per unit area. So if either the organism is living or is dead, then you find you weigh that organism per unit area where the organism is found. Then you have the biomass of an organism. Now, the living is not too accurate than the dead. With the dead, even though it's accurate, but that one too, you have to kill the organism before you get the accurate biomass of an organism. So you have to kill the organism when it's dead. You dry the organism. After drying, then you weigh the organism. Then you divide per the unit area where the organism is found. Then you have the biomass of an organism. But with the living, that one is difficult to estimate the biomass because you have a point in time you pick the organism it might be that the organism will not allow you, will not become, so you will not get the exact weight of that organism. So as with the pyramid of numbers, if the biomass of the trophic level is estimated, it could be found that the lower trophic level has higher biomass than those above them. So this only tells you that as we are moving up the trophic level, the biomass reduces. So you have grass, a lot of them. Now, when you burn the grass, the dry weight of that grass there is more heavier, or is higher than that of when you capture those grasshoppers, you dry them out and you weigh them. So when it's moving up, then the biomass is also what? It's reducing, just like the numbers. So let's look at how this one looks like. So you can see when you weigh out, it's weighed in grams. Weighed in grams. So you say gram per unit area. So weighed in grams. So look at the diagram there. Look at the producers. When you find the dry weight of these producers, you have 10,000 grams. Then herbivores. So herbivores, let's say grasshoppers, when you find out the dry weight of those herbivores in that food chain, you notice that it's 100 grams. So it's just an estimate I'm giving you. Then a carnivore, so any carnivore that you can find, use a frog. So the frog feeding on the grasshoppers, when you find it dry weight, it wouldn't be that much because of the energy that has been moving up the trophic level, energy reducing up when you are going. So this is a diagrammatic representation of the pyramid of biomass. So as I said, let me repeat it again. With a pyramid of biomass, a more accurate representation is when these organisms are dead. Then you can dry them out. Then you weigh them and know how or their weight per unit area. Okay. So the final pyramid, the representation that we can represent organisms in a pyramid form as pyramid of energy. Pyramid of energy. So as the name sounds, it deals with the flow of energy in organisms, just the flow of how energy is being flowed from one organism to another. Now, a pyramid of energy considers the energy flow in the feeding relation or food chain, as I made mention. So it just tells you the flow of energy in the food chain. Now, the energy value of each organism is determined by burning a known mass and measuring the heat produced. So over here again, organism has to be dead. With energy there, the organism has to be dead so that they are able to know the exact energy that has been used up by one organism or the other. Now this is expressed as units of energy per unit area of the community per unit time. So it measures the unit of the organism, so the weight of the organism per unit area, that is the area of the community, then over the time that you were taking that sample. So that tells you pyramid of energy. Now this is a diagrammatic representation of this pyramid of numbers. Now again, when you are moving up the trophic level, when you are moving up, now the energy decreases because if you remember in our previous lesson, you notice that, let's say the sun this green plant, the producers absorb 100% energy from the sun. Now the grasshoppers will go and feed. They'll something small. They can't feed on all of them. So at the point in time, they can only feed about just 10% of the energy that's been produced for the whole plant. Now this 10% has been energy that has been eaten or absorbed by these grasshoppers. The frog would come and feed on the grasshopper. Now, in some instance, the frog can eat all the organism wholly, or it might not eat the organism wholly. It can eat just the head and leave the body. At that point, that's maybe taking only just about 0.1% of the energy. So if you can look, the first one, the producer, the last one is just sunlight. So energy that has been absorbed by the producer. So you can have 62,431 kilojoule of energy that has been produced by the producer. Now, when a secondary primary consumer feeds on it, when you look at the flow of energy, the energy has decreased. From 62, you have 4,986 kilojoule of energy by the primary consumer. The secondary consumer will feed on the primary. Look at the energy that has been absorbed, only 35 kilojoule. So when you're moving up the trophic level in a food chain or web, the energy level decreases. So it moves down when you are moving down, when you're moving up the food chain or web. So this gives you a view of these three representation on a pyramid form. So you have pyramid of numbers, deals with numbers, pyramid of biomass, deals with the dry weight or living weight of an organism. Then you have pyramid of energy itself. So if you have any question on this three, you let me know. If you have any question on this three things that I made mention of, let me know. Okay. Now we look at how we determine the food chain and web. How do you know that this organism fed on this? How do you know that this organism fed on that? How to determine it? How do you know? Now there are three methods that we use to determine, or we use in determining food chain and food web. There are three methods. Now method one is direct observation. Direct observation. Now the name sounds direct. It means you are looking at it going on. So it takes a lot of time. Why? You have to go and stay on the plantation, observe as this feeding relationship is going on. So you go, you observe, you see grasshoppers feeding on the plant, on the green plant. Then at the point in time, you sit down and notice that, hey, frog has fed on these grasshoppers. And so, oh, that means that frog can feed on grasshoppers. Then at the point in time, you sit down for some time, nothing is going on there. Later on, you observe that a hawk has landed on the plantation and has captured what? Or has eaten the frog, or is feeding on the frog. Now, that tells you a direct method of observing a food chain or web. So this direct observation is done by observing the feeding habit of some species. From the direct observation, the food chain and food web can be constructed. So this one takes time, a lot of time to do that, depending on what happens in the habitat or in the ecosystem. Now the second method, that is the gut method. Also, it also takes time, but easy to achieve. Now, what happens with this is that they normally pick the consumers. Now, when they pick one consumer, then they dissect that consumer and know the kind of organism that that consumer has eaten or has fed on. So with that, they are able to determine that this organism fed on this, and that fed on that, and this fed on this. So let's say the grasshopper, they dissect the grasshopper and they find particles or leftover of grass in the grasshopper. They know that no, this grasshopper feeds on grass. They open a frog and they find grasshopper in the frog, or they find any other organism that is a herbivore in the frog. They know that, oh, then the frog fed on this organism. So that is the dissect, the gut method. So they look into canal these organisms. So this takes place by capturing the animal, killing it, and dissecting it to obtain samples in their stomach. Now this provides direct information about the organism on which each consumer feeds. With this information, one can determine a food chain. So this gives you a direct information. It gives you a practical view. You're able to see without sitting down for a very long time to be able to know which organism fed on what organism. Now, the third and the third and interesting way of determining food chain and web is by radioactive or tracer method. Radioactive or tracer method. Now, this is very expensive when doing this. Now, at this point, what they do is that they normally introduce some radioactive materials, especially phosphorus, P32, and sulfur. Now they introduce them to the producers. So at the producer level, so at the green plants, they add it to the fertilizers and they use it on the farm. Now when these radioactive chemicals are being absorbed in the soil, then this soil with these nutrients are absorbed into the roots of the plant. Now it gets into the system of the whole plant. This when organisms feed on the plant, there's a trace of the radioactive material in the organism that feeds on the grass. When another organism feeds on that same animal, the radioactive particles, some of them also get into the preceding organism. So it's just like it's been transferred, but just a little trace of it to know that the organism has been exposed to a radioactive particle. That's how come you have the word tracer method. So it enables them to trace the radioactive particles. Now, this involves the use of labeled radioactive food substances such as phosphorus or sulfur being introduced into inorganic fertilizers. The roots of the plants absorb the fertilizers and combine them in their plant material and food, as I made mention of. Now, by using sensitive counters, so the machines that they use to detect or trace these radioactive particles, the path of the phosphorus can be followed. Animals that are found to be radioactive may have consumed materials from the plant or eaten one or more animals that have already fed on the plant. So as I already explained. So it's just a form of tracing the radioactive particle that is found in each organism. So these are basically the three methods of determining a food chain and web. So any question on how on this method, the direct observation, the gut examination, and the radioactive or tracer method? Any question? If you have any question, you can put on the audio and alert me. If you have a question, put on the audio and alert me. Okay, so in the absence of any question, I'll move to the last aspect of our class today. We'll look at how organisms are able to associate with each other, how organisms are able to live with each other, whether it will live on another organism, or to live in another organism, or to live with another organism. Look at that association. Now, this association is referred to as biological association. It's like your home. Whether you are living in your father's house, you are living close to your father's house, or you are living with neighbors, you are living alone with neighbors. So this association is what we look at. And we in biology, we refer to them as biological association. Biological association. Biological association. Okay. So the development and survival of organism or population depends on the activities of other organisms or other species. Now, all organisms associate and interact with others directly or indirectly. Directly or indirectly. Now, at the point where it's like I've already explained what I'm about to say. Now, an association can be referred to as intraspecific. Intraspecific. When the association is between organisms of the same species. So the association between organisms of the same species is what we refer to as intraspecific. Then that association between organisms of different species is what we call interspecific. So let's say in your house, the association that takes place in your house is an intraspecific. You know, you are of the same family. You are the same. You are one member. You consist of the same members of the family, one family. Now, when you have neighbors, and there's an association between you and your neighbors around, that is interspecific. So different houses that are coming together as one. So this inter tells you that it's an association between different species. Then intra tells you an association between the same species. Now, reasons for this biological association, why organisms interact with each other directly or indirectly. Why? So one, they do that to obtain food. It helps them. When they interact with each other, they are able to get food and eat. Two, they seek protection. They're able to get protection from predators. Three, they have competitive advantages. So when they are competing for resources, because they are having an association, one would have an advantage over the other, or the other, so vice versa. So there's an advantage over the other. Then the last one, intimate friendship for coexistence. So they can live successfully in an environment together. Aside when they are having physical barriers, biological barriers, they can live together in one ecosystem. Okay. Now this association between organisms takes a lot of form. Now the forms, they are about almost five or six. Now it will be in the form of symbiosis, living together, mutualism, commensalism, parasitism, epiphytism. Okay, I've already mentioned so basically 5. So this depends on the type of association. So symbiosis, mutualism, commensalism, epiphytism, parasitism. There's 5. So what you need to know about this is that with the first one, symbiosis, all the others are under this symbiosis. So they form the basis of uh, an association. So let's see what this symbiosis talks about. Now, it's an association where the relationship that they share between two different organisms or two different species, in which at least one organism is dependent upon the other and the two live together consistently. So it deals with two different species. You can have a goat and a sheep, whereby one depends on the other. Now, at the point where when one depends on the other, whether one will harm the other or one will just depend on the other, it will not harm it. They are all explained under whether they undergo mutualism, where both parties will benefit. Commensalism, one would depend on the other, will not harm that organism. It just seeks protection and food. Parasitism, where one will harm the other, causing harm, eventually death on the other organism. Saprophytism, that one deals with dead decay matter. Then epiphyte. Epiphyte is just like the commensalism bar in plants. So we look at them, we look at this organism one after the other. We look at them one, and know the type of relationship that they undergo. But for today, we'll just look at the mutualistic association between organisms. So look at mutualism, then we'll end there. Then in our next lesson, we'll tackle the rest. So mutualism. Now it comes from the word mutual. There's a mutual relationship going on between you and somebody. It means you are agreeing to one thing. You are sharing one thing. So there's a friendly relationship. There's a friendly association between the two of you. That is mutualism. Now it's a close relationship between two organisms of different species in which both partners benefit. So everyone is benefiting from the association. You are agreeing to one thing. You are both benefiting from the association. That is mutualism. Now, the organism may be two plants that are undergoing the mutualism. It may be two animals or a plant and an animal. So this is the form that you can take. It may be two plants being mutually exclusive, or they are having a mutual relationship, or two animals, or between a plant and an animal. Now, one organism may live in or on or close by another organism. So either the one lives inside another organism, or it lives on another organism, or it lives close by another organism. That is how this mutualism can take its form. So you have the last one. This mutualistic association often allows organisms to obtain food or protection or protection. So in a way, they protect themselves. They know what they are going by. So examples of this mutualistic association, examples of mutualism. These are just some few. So one, termites feed on cellulose. they will feed on cellulose, but they will not be able to digest the cellulose that they fed on. But inside them, so living inside them, they have this protozoans inside them, and they would rather feed or digest the cellulose, and the termites would obtain energy from that digest the food, the cellulose has been digested by the protozoa. So they are sharing a mutual agreement. So over here, the protozoa is living inside the termite. 2, with plant, you have nitrogen fixing bacterium, in other words called rhizobium. So you notice that I've italicized it because it's a scientific name. Now, which it lives in the root nodules of leguminous plants, in turn converts nitrogen to nitrates, which are readily absorbed by the roots of plants. Another mutual association is lichen, or someone say lichen. Now, this lichen or lichen that you'd mention is an association between an algae and a fungus. In other words, what happens with this is that the algae manufactures the food, then the fungus uses the food. So they are one. So the two together is what we call the lichen or lichen. So what happens with them is that the algae will produce the food, manufacture the food, sorry. Then the food will be used by the fungus. So they are sharing a mutual agreement. They are agreeing on one thing. Then our last example, the other examples attached, but these are common examples that you can have. So you have clownfish living within the waving mass of the poisonous tentacles of sea anemones, which provide its home and support. So the first image is what you have, the clownfish living in the poisonous tentacles of the sea anemone, providing home and protection. So that's the image you have there. Then the second one is the root noodles in the leguminous plant, whereby they convert this nitrogen into nitrate and being used up by the plant. So there are other examples of how organisms can live mutually. They are agreeing on one thing. Whether the organism lives in, it lives on, or it lives close by the organism determines the mutualistic association. So that ends our class. Our next lesson, we'll look at the other symbiotic association, that is saprophytism, epiphytism, commensalism. We'll look at them, then we will see how they affect organisms in an ecosystem. Now, there's a trial, an activity that when you, after the class has ended, when they send the slides to you, then you try these questions. We'll discuss it in our next lesson. So you'd have it at your disposal to attend to it. Okay, so thank you. We'll end the class here.